Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into the world of religions. Islam is a global religion founded on the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, who lived in the 7th century CE. Islam unites Muslims worldwide under the sole God, Allah, preaching worship and submission to the will of Allah. Islam advocates for adherence to the 5 basic duties known as the 5 pillars of Islam. While central governance is typically absent, various organizations such as Sunni and Shia muftiyates address religious governance and organization issues. Approximate number of followers, around 1.9 billion. Christianity is a global religion founded on the teachings of Jesus Christ, who lived in the 1st century CE. Christianity unites believers worldwide under the central authority of the Church. Preaching love, forgiveness, and mercy, Christianity is based on the Bible, which contains sacred texts for its followers. While central governance is often represented by the Vatican in the Catholic Church and Synod in the Orthodox Church, each denomination has its unique governance structures. Approximate number of followers, around 2.3 billion. Buddhism is a doctrine based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, who attained the title of Buddha after his spiritual enlightenment in the 6th century BCE. Buddhism unites followers worldwide in their quest for liberation from suffering through spiritual enlightenment. Central governance is absent in Buddhism, but religious leaders, such as the Dalai Lamas in Tibetan Buddhism, possess certain authority. Approximate number of followers, around 520 million. Judaism is one of the oldest world religions, with roots tracing back to ancient times in human history. Judaism is based on the teachings of the Torah and Talmud, which are sacred texts for its followers. Believers in Judaism recognize one God and strive to adhere to the commandments and rituals established in the sacred texts. Although Judaism lacks a central religious authority, communities of believers gather in synagogues for prayer, scripture readings, and discussions of religious matters. Approximate number of followers, around 14 million. Hinduism is an ancient religion predominantly practiced in India, which unites believers under the common teachings of the Vedas and other sacred texts. Hinduism preaches karma, dharma, and faith in multiple deities, including Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. While central governance is absent, there are religious leaders and scholars who promote and preserve the teachings and rituals of this religion. Approximate number of followers, around 1.2 billion. Sikhism is a monotheistic religion founded on the teachings of Guru Nanak and his followers in the 15th and 16th centuries in the modern-day regions of India and Pakistan. Sikhism unites followers worldwide in their belief in the one God and principles of justice and equality. Central governance is absent, but there are religious leaders and scholars who lead communities and serve as authorities. Approximate number of followers, around 30 million. Jainism is an Indian religion dating back to ancient times and based on the teachings of Tirthankaras, spiritual teachers who attained enlightenment and reached the highest spiritual state. Jainism preaches the principles of non-violence, ahimsa, asceticism, and reverence for all living beings. This doctrine places special emphasis on practicing restraint of passions, purity of thought and action, as well as detachment from material attachments. In terms of religious governance, central authority is absent, but there are religious leaders and communities of believers who uphold and transmit the teachings of Jainism. Approximate number of followers, around 6 million. Shintoism is a Japanese religion based on mystical reverence for nature, spirits, and deities, as well as reverence for ancestors. Shintoism asserts that spirits reside in everything surrounding humans, and it calls for harmony with nature and spiritual forces. Central religious governance is absent, but there are Shinto communities and shrines that play a key role in rituals, ceremonies, and prayers. Approximate number of followers, around 4 million. Confucianism is a Chinese philosophical and religious tradition based on the teachings of Confucius, a Chinese thinker and philosopher who preached moral principles, social customs, and family values. Confucianism emphasizes the importance of virtue, harmony, and respect for elders and traditions. Although central religious governance is absent, there are religious communities and cultural centers that support and promote the teachings of Confucius. Approximate number of followers, around 6 million. Bahai is a global religion that emerged in the 19th century in Persia, preaching the unity of humanity, global peace, and acceptance of all religious traditions. Baha'is assert that all prophets and founders of religions were sent by the same God and call for harmony and cooperation among all believers. Central religious governance is absent, but there are religious communities and administrative structures that coordinate Baha'i activities. Approximate number of followers, around 7 million. Daoism is a Chinese religious and philosophical tradition that combines elements of Taoism, Chinese alchemy, and spiritual practices. Daoism places great emphasis on longevity, harmony, and health, while also advocating for naturalness and acceptance of change. Central religious governance is absent, but there are religious communities and spiritual schools that transmit and develop the teachings of Daoism. Approximate number of followers, around 12 million. Druidism is an ancient European religion with roots stretching back into the distant past, linked to a belief in the power of nature and the spiritual world. Druids, as spiritual leaders, played a key role in this religion. Druids often seek harmony with nature, recognizing its sacredness, and pursue spiritual development through communion with nature and meditation practices. Central religious governance does not exist in the same sense as it does in organized world religions. The exact number of followers is not precisely known, but Druid communities exist in various parts of the world. Santeria is a religious system that developed in Cuba through the merging of African religious traditions, Catholic cult, and traditions brought by slaves from Africa. Santeria is based on the worship of orishas, spirits, or gods considered intermediaries between the divine and human worlds. Rituals, prayers, and ceremonies involve the use of music, dance, and other forms of faith expression. Central religious governance does not exist. Santeria communities are often organized into groups known as ile or cabildo, which conduct religious ceremonies and support spiritual education. Approximate number of followers, around 5 million. Unitarianism is a Christian movement that emphasizes the unity of God, as well as intellectual and moral development of individuals. Unitarianism is characterized by a tolerant attitude towards other religious traditions and philosophies and advocates for the principle of free search for truth. It encourages rational exploration and acceptance of theological and philosophical ideas. Central religious governance is absent. Unitarian communities, known as churches, are often organized in local communities for worship services, discussions, and social events. Approximate number of followers, around 800,000. Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest world religions, founded by the prophet Zoroaster in ancient Persia. Zoroastrianism preaches the struggle between good and evil, as well as the worship of Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity representing light and goodness. Rituals and ceremonies of Zoroastrianism are conducted in fire temples, and its followers strive for spiritual enlightenment and adherence to ethical principles, including purity of thought, word, and deed. Central religious governance is absent. Although there are priests and spiritual leaders, each Zoroastrian community typically governs itself independently. Approximate number of followers, around 200,000. Tengrism is an ancient Turkic religion based on the worship of Tengri, the celestial god symbolizing the heavens and natural forces. Tengrism also includes elements of shamanism and the worship of natural spirits and forces. Religious rituals and ceremonies of Tengrism are conducted in natural locations and sacred ritual objects. Central religious governance is absent, and each community or tribe has its own spiritual leaders who conduct rituals and guide spiritual principles. The exact number of followers is not precisely known, but there are Tengri communities in various parts of the world. Yazidism is a small religious community predominantly found among the Kurds, with unique syncretic elements incorporating influences from Islam, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism. Distinguished from other world religions, Yazidism has its own sacred texts, symbolism, and rituals that are unparalleled in other faiths. Followers of Yazidism often adhere to strict rituals and traditions related to the veneration of sanctuaries and purification rites. Central religious governance is absent. Traditionally, the Yazidi community has been organized in tribal structures with spiritual leaders and spiritual assemblies. Approximate number of followers, around 1 to 2 million. Caodai is a traditional Vietnamese religion that represents a complex system of beliefs and rituals based on ancient Chinese philosophical principles, cultural traditions, and mystical beliefs. This religion also incorporates elements of ancestor worship, nature worship, and mysticism. Followers of Caodai often observe traditional ceremonies and holidays associated with calendar cycles and spiritual rituals. There is no central religious authority. Caodai is often practiced in the form of family rituals and community ceremonies. Candomble is an Afro-Brazilian religion rooted in African spiritual traditions that came to Brazil during the times of the slave trade. Candomble unites its followers in worshiping orishas, spirits or gods considered intermediaries between the divine and human realms. Rituals, music, dance, and other forms of expression play a significant role in this religion. While central religious governance is absent in the traditional sense, there are spiritual leaders and communities known as terreiros that uphold rituals and teach spiritual principles. Approximate number of followers not precisely known, but there is a significant number of practitioners across various parts of Brazil. Krishnaism is a spiritual movement based on the worship of the deity Krishna from Hindu mythology. Followers of this movement, known as Vaishnavas, adhere to the teaching of bhakti, the path of devoted service to the deity. They believe that true happiness and liberation can be attained through love and devotion to Krishna. Central religious governance does not exist. Krishnaism practices are based on communal rituals, meditation, and spiritual teachings conducted under the guidance of spiritual mentors. Approximate number of followers, around 1–2 million.